Hello everyone and welcome to a new podcast episode of Cultivate Kindness by the G&E. Today we're going to be talking all about time management and how to potentially balance it all. I'm Emily, and before we start the episode I just wanted to do a little check-in with you all, and if this week has been a particularly tough week for you, I really hope you feel better soon, and potentially listening to some of our podcast episodes might feel a bit like you are talking to a friend. Now, the title of this podcast episode might be a little misleading, because the reality is that finding a complete balance with anything in your life isn't really possible. Now, that might be a little bit disappointing, but I'm not trying to say don't try and strive for balance, but the reality is you will not always feel as though you're on top of everything that you need to do. We can't be good at everything all the time, and sometimes you might find that if you are trying to find more balance in your life, things actually get or feel worse. So if someone just tells you need to find a work-life balance or just try and find more balance in your life, that's maybe why you're so stressed. The reality of hearing that isn't always it's quite difficult to sometimes hear that, because it's really not that easy and it's not actually something that's that achievable as well. But I think the most important thing really that this whole podcast episode is going to talk about is the importance of listening to yourself and your body. So if you are trying to do everything all at once, as well as work, or whether that is at your job or university or school, you will not be able to find the time and will eventually burn out from stress if you're really truly trying to do everything all at once. All your hobbies, all your chores in the house, meeting up with friends all the time, socialising, doing all those things as well as working, you're eventually going to burn out and feel very stressed and exhausted. So this episode's just I'm going to talk to you a little bit about sort of how to listen to yourself a little bit more, and then I will give you some tips that I've found online about time management, because sometimes that can help if you're struggling with trying to get even just little tasks done because you're finding them very stressful and overwhelming. These tips might help you out. So to start, I want you to first think about what it feels like to be balanced to you. Everyone is in a different position, and depending on your lifestyle, it might be easier to do certain things than others. If you work a 9 to 5 or work 2 jobs, you might often feel exhausted after work and feel as though you have no time. If you also have family to look after, that is an added element of stress or exhaustion. Or you might be a student who is currently studying at university, and balance might look very, very different again. You might be having super late nights and waking up super late in the day as well, and that can obviously affect your mental health and your physical well-being. And so first of all, I just want you to sort of think about how you would like to sort of see your lifestyle change if at the moment you are currently struggling. And that might be you want to incorporate more physical activity into your life, or you would just like 5 or 15 minutes to read a bit of your favourite book. And I think by doing some of the sort of time management tips that I'm going to give you, you might be able to then introduce these into your life. And I think by what I sort of mean by balancing it all, it's actually sort of just, again, like I said, listening to yourself. So you might have a lot to do, and oftentimes you don't have a choice in the things that you have to do. But if you do have a certain amount of time to yourself one day and you want to actually read, you should listen to yourself and do that, and not sort of push yourself to the extreme to be more and more productive, for example. And I think also your attachment to your phone is a very, very big one. If you feel as though you're not having enough time in your life at the moment, you might just be on your phone way too much, and sort of any downtime that you do have at the moment, you're sort of just scrolling instead of maybe doing something else that you'd really like to do. Another thing that I think might help with sort of time management, but also trying to figure out how you would like to sort of change little habits in your life to feel as though you are able to do things you also enjoy, is reviewing your week. So having more regular either mental health check-ins or just check-ins in general in how your week is sort of looking. So by doing this, you often can reflect on how you are feeling and see if you have been giving yourself a break or if you have been overdoing it. So maybe you're working full time at the moment and then you're also trying to socialise every day after work, or you're also trying to do a hobby every day after work. Just think about sometimes not always feeling like you can do everything all at once. So maybe you want to socialise once a week, and then one evening a week you might want to spend some time with yourself or with a loved one. And then you might want to read if that is one of your hobbies, or any other hobby that you might have. So check in with yourself regularly to see how you're feeling and adjust your routine or priorities when necessary. And again, I want to reiterate, there are certain things that you unfortunately won't be able to completely adjust, but I sometimes find myself, if I am having a really, really busy week, I might try and push myself to do even more because I think I have to. And the reality is, if you do that, as I said earlier, you will eventually burn out, and anything you do, even if it's something that you normally really enjoy, you won't actually feel any enjoyment from it anymore because you are so exhausted. Another thing that they say that sort of I was reading in a lot of different like articles and blogs and stuff is sort of minimizing multitasking, and focusing on one task at a time can actually increase your efficiency in doing it. So I think psychologically, constantly switching between tasks can actually decrease your efficiency in doing it. And I think it's possibly to do with the fact that when you're in a focused mindset and you're on sort of one task, you can really, really focus and actually get it finished. Whereas if you're working on 2 or 3 different things at one time, it actually will take you longer to complete it. So that is another thing. If you have lots of little things that you might need to get done, whether that's checking if you've paid everything you need to for the month, or if you have a friend's birthday coming up, you need to sort that out. Just little things like that. Try not to constantly multitask. Even though I think in life we're doing that a lot, I think when you're sort of spending your own time on something, try and minimise the amount that you're doing it, because you'll end up actually taking longer to do all those things instead of just completing one of them. Another rule that, or idea that I found online, that I've heard actually a few people talk about, is using the 2-minute rule. So if something that you need to get done takes only 2 minutes or less, or maybe even just like 15 minutes or less, try and do it immediately rather than leaving it for later. So a lot of people, or I think some of my friends, they do this. If there's something that they really need to get done, but really don't want to, so for example, you need to clean your room or something, an idea to sort of just get yourself up is to sort of count down from 3 or 5. And as soon as you reach that point, just get up, because sometimes it can be so easy to spend more time actually avoiding getting the thing that you need to get done. So that's just like another thing that I thought was quite interesting. And then another one is prioritizing your tasks. So this is sort of goes along a little bit with the 2-minute rule, and sort of getting, if something isn't going to take you very long, try and get that done first. And then another way of sort of separating your tasks and things that you need to get done is into important and urgent. So do these tasks immediately. Important but not urgent, so schedule these for later. Not important but urgent, delegate these if possible. So if there's someone else that can help you with this, let them know. Or if it's something that you can just get done quickly, you can also do that. And then not important and not urgent, sort of minimize these, or you can sort of push these to the back, especially if you're feeling really overwhelmed and busy. It's something that you don't need to focus on right now. Another thing which I feel like we've spoken a lot about in some of our podcast episodes, but it's learning to say no to things. So earlier at the start of the podcast episode, I was sort of talking about how sometimes you won't, all the time, you won't be able to do everything all at once, or every single week you will not be able to do everything. So it's understanding and prioritizing the things you do need to get done, the things you'd like to get done, and also giving yourself time for yourself. So sometimes you will have to say no and sort of take control and say no, because I think a lot of people will probably feel this way, but often you might be saying yes to others because you might feel an unreasonable pressure to immediately please people. But it's important to also sort of, in order to actually have the energy to do things, you need to have time to yourself and make sure you're looking after yourself as well. And I also wanted to say just like being reasonable with yourself. So being compassionate towards you and yourself is so important. That you will feel like there is a limit to our resources, like whether that's time and energy or anything else, and it's completely understandable to want to accomplish and do so many things all the time. However, it's important to consider how much time is in a day and how much time you actually realistically have. So sort of being kind to yourself and understanding that you cannot be perfect, and there will always sort of be other things that you will end up having to do. So even if you have this pressure to sort of complete everything in one day, the reality is there will be something else that will come up the next day. So it's really important to sort of be in the present and focus on the today, because again, it's just, I think being present is a really hard thing to do. Especially because it constantly feels like we're either seeing or thinking about the past, or thinking about our future and what you might want to do with it, or what do you have you might be constantly thinking about what you're anxious or worried about. But being in the present is so important, because all those things are just out of your control and you cannot change the past either. So it's just understanding the importance of the present and focusing on the today. So if you can, try and avoid obsessing about the future. And I think this is a podcast episode I'm hopefully going to be doing with a friend. We're going to talk about the idea of obsessing over the future and why we might do it and things that might help. But focus on what is happening on today, and creating a healthy, balanced life requires you to be present as well, whether that's 1 week on your friends, 1 week on your family, 1 week more on your work or your hobbies. And I think that is what I sort of want you to take away from this podcast episode, is to be compassionate to yourself. Do prioritise tasks when you are trying to decide when to do certain things, and listen to yourself and your body. Don't overdo it, so learn to say no. And the final one is also just knowing that you will have different moments in your life where you are focusing on certain aspects. So that might be, you might be in a period of your life right now where your work is what you have to really focus on to be able to do the things you want to do in the future. And that is fine. Make sure you also have other things going on, but it might be your main focus and you're not going to be in balance with everything else. Or right now you might be needing to spend or be wanting to spend a lot of time with family. So if you're older and have worked for many, many years, you might be reflecting and realising you want to be spending more time with your family. Or you might have a hobby that you've always wanted to pursue but never had the time to, and right now that's where you're putting your time and energy a little bit more. So it's sort of understanding that the idea of balance isn't necessarily being able to do everything all at once. It's sort of being content in having a focus during a certain period of time, and also being able to get the little things done that might be adding up, in your life and actually making you feel stressed, but being able to sort of use that 2-second rule, or delegate tasks if you actually really don't need to get them done yourself and you can ask for help, then definitely do. So yeah, this is going to be a little bit of a shorter episode this week because we've just been very, very busy, but I hope it's just made you think a little bit about the idea of what it means to balance it all. I think the word balance I used to use a lot and used to always want to strive for, and I believed, and I still believe it is one of my values, but I think I was sort of forcing myself to try and find it all the time, and it actually ended up feeling, because I was putting pressure on myself to find it, I think things were actually feeling worse, or I always felt like I was unable to achieve this thing, instead of actually just being in the present and being compassionate towards myself as well. So I hope this was an interesting episode. Please look after yourselves, and wishing you all the best until next time. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.